Okay, shall I begin?
Yes, Prabhu.
Welcome, devotees. Hare Krishna. Today we will be talking on discussing the Srimad Bhagavatam first canto, 12th chapter, verse number 5. Let me begin with my prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadadi Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutopada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhayascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshetarine Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So let me share my screen with the verse. So again, we are discussing Srimad Bhagavatam first canto, chapter 12, verse number 5. And as the title of the chapter says, Birth of Emperor Maharaj Parikshit. So yesterday, Lingaraju Prabhu talked about the leadership qualities of Maharaj Yudhisthira, and I thought I'll continue with the leadership qualities, but then it went in a different direction. So we'll see. So let me recite the verse. Sampada Kratavo Loka Mahishi Bhrataro Mahi Jambudvipa Dipatyam Cha Yashashchatri Divam Gatam Sampada Kritavaloka Mahishi Bhrataro Mahi Jambudvipa Dhipatyam Cha Yashascha Divam Gatam. Synonym: Sampada, opulence; Kritava, sacrifices; Loka, future destination; Mahishi, the queens; Bhratara, the brothers; Mahi, the earth; Jambudvipa, the globe or planet of our residence; Adipatyam, sovereignty; Cha, also; Yasha, fame; Cha, and; Tridivam, celestial planets; Gatam, spread over. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. News even reached the celestial planets about Maharaj Yudhisthira's worldly possessions, the sacrifices by which he would attain a better destination, his queen, his stalwart brothers, his extensive land, his sovereignty over the planet Earth, his fame, etc. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Only a rich and great man's name and fame are known all over the world. And the name and fame of Maharaj Yudhisthira reached the higher planets because of his good administration, worldly possessions, glorious wife Draupadi, the strength of his brothers Bhima and Arjuna, and his solid sovereign power over the world, known as Jambudvipa. Here the word loka is significant. There are different lokas on higher planets, scattered all over the sky, both material and spiritual. A person can reach them by dint of his work in the present life, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 9.25. No forceful entrance is allowed there. The tiny material scientists and engineers who have discovered vehicles to travel over a few thousand miles in outer space will not be allowed entrance. That is not the way to reach the better planets. One must qualify himself to enter into such happy planets by sacrifice and service. Those who are sinful in every step of life can expect only to be degraded into animal life, to suffer more and more the pangs of material existence. And this is also stated in Bhagavad Gita 16.19. Maharaj Yudhisthira's good sacrifices and qualifications were so lofty and virtuous that even the residents of the higher celestial planets were already prepared to receive him as one of them. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So we will dissect the translation and the purport by Srila Prabhupada, even though it is a very short purport, and it seems like I was thinking with this short purport, what can we talk about? And there were not many lectures by spiritual masters or Srila Prabhupada available on this purport or on this verse also when I was doing the research yesterday. But then as we go, I can see within the purport, there's so many points that Srila Prabhupada makes, which then can be expanded. He expands them also in various different places, and taking them together, we can try to understand this or elaborate on this a little more. So here, some of the points that I will attempt to elaborate on are: news even reached the celestial planets about Maharaj Yudhisthira's worldly possessions, sacrifices, etc. Then Srila Prabhupada talks about there are different lokas or higher planets scattered all over the sky, both material and spiritual. Then one must qualify himself to enter into such happy planets by sacrifice and service. And those who are sinful in every step of life can expect only to be degraded into animal life. So, overall, that will be the theme of the discussion. So, I'll stop sharing. And so, beginning with news reached the celestial planets, and that's in the translation also. So, here Sutta Goswami is saying that the news of Maharaj Yudhisthira's fame reached the higher planetary systems. So we can understand that this fame that he's talking about is not like that of fame today, the fame that we understand today. And to understand better, what is fame today? It would be nice. It would have been better if we could have a interactive discussion. But I know Bhagavatam devotees usually just listen. But feel free to pitch in if you have inputs, like what is fame today? What do we need? What does one need to do to be on the news channel? To be on the, we don't have newspapers, but to be on the front page of the newspaper, to be on the front uh, page of the news channel. What does somebody need to do? So we know that from experience, there, if somebody commits a serious crime, they will be on the news channel. Sports people are generally on the news page, they are highlighted. Or something that needs to be, someone needs to do something outrageous, something very uncommon, and that uncommon need not be something as we understand in the mode of goodness, or some virtuous act, but something outrageous towards these other qualities, like of being a criminal, or something destructive. So that's when they come to news, and that is fame in today's world. If somebody is virtuous, if somebody does something good, or if devotees are trying to preach, if they are trying to make people Krishna conscious, or if they are going on Sankirtan party, those are not news. Those are something okay. So that is the fame that we are talking today. And here we see the fame of Yudhisthira Maharaj is something that reached the higher planetary systems, where the living beings on those higher planetary systems are of much higher consciousness. So then the next question comes: how did people of the higher planetary system know Yudhishthir Maharaj? They are, sometimes we live in different cities, different states, and we don't know about people living in different places, even in the on the same world. And here we are talking about the living entities knowing about Yudhishthir Maharaj on planet Earth, and the news traveling and spreading on the higher planetary systems. So it's not just here where there are news channels being related, being transmitted everywhere. CNN, Fox News, Times of whatever, India, New York. But the news is traveling and spreading in the higher planetary system about the reign of Yudhishthir Maharaj, about his possessions, about his sacrifices, his queens, his brothers, his land, sovereignty over the planet, his fame, all of that. So we can understand that in those days, that automatically we can conclude, or it would mean that there was space travel, interplanetary system travel of within the space. So we can safely deduce that in those days, living entities or living beings from these outer planetary systems used to visit and frequently visit here and look at the state here, and then go back and spread the news there. So that's how they were spreading. Now we don't see them coming anymore. We don't see, I mean, sometimes a UFO is identified or spotted, uh, unidentified flying object, and it becomes a news here. And some, we may even get threatened by those things. Somebody is trying to come here, take over, and it's mostly anxiety and curiosity. But in those days, we can assume that space travelers were coming, visiting planet Earth, looking and taking a note of things going on, and then going back and spreading the news. So why don't they come today? Because those living beings are of higher consciousness, and they don't come anymore because the overall consciousness is very polluted, quite polluted. And we'll discuss this about the consciousness more a little bit later. Because what consciousness is there today? It's basically same as animal: eating, sleeping, mating, defending, or defending can be more said in a different way, fighting. There are fighting at all levels today. We see there are fights in the family, within the society, within the state, between states, at the level of countries. And fights are mainly what is the reason for fighting? It's mainly for sense gratification. That's it. And sense gratification, so that also means that consciousness of the people is so polluted that we are so self-driven, we are so self-centered, that that's all. Self, and that self-centeredness is can be at an individual level, at the family level, at the state and country level. So that's all we care for. So that is the consciousness that we are in today. And what differentiates us from the animals? Now, we as devotees know what differentiates us from the animals, but in general, from a perspective of general people, it is the capacity or the capability to inquire. In, the capacity to inquire is there in us, which is not there in the animals. But most people do not ask. They 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 won't ask the basic questions also. The inquiry is like, who am I, or what's the goal of this human life? Why am I here? Why am I suffering? Am I really required to suffer, or do I just take it for granted? Why do we die? I, I mean, these are some of the questions that we can inquire. What's out there? There's such a vast space. Is there what is there something out there? Is there something beyond? So these are the some of the questions that we as humans have the capacity or capability to inquire. But most people do not ask these questions. We are simply busy abusing the planet, like I said earlier, in for sense, mainly for sense gratification. And because we are in this consciousness, or constantly trying to abuse the planet Earth for sense gratification, things constantly change. We see that uh, things like dress, fashion, food, they constantly change. Like, the fashion may change from month to month, from quarter to quarter. In the last summer, there may be some a different fashion. Now this summer, the the fashion would have changed. The dressing style would have changed. What was considered a good dress last year, or maybe a couple of years back, is no longer a good dress. So things are constantly changing. The food we eat, the everything is changing, primarily because we are self-driven, and we are trying to constantly gratify our senses. But the Vedic society, Vedic knowledge, or in general, a person who has transcended these material propensities, or who has transcended this material consciousness, for them things don't change, they are constant. We can see that the Vedic knowledge is constant. It was there like years before it was the same. Years, when I say years before, it could be hundreds of years, thousands of years, millions of years. The Vedic knowledge remains constant. We can see from the scriptures, or even from the examples. When Srila Prabhupada came, his whatever the way he used to dress, the same way he dressed even 10 years after, the same way he would dress even when he was India before coming to America. And even today, people following the Vedic culture or following on his footsteps, or in general, who have elevated their consciousness, they dress the same. And if we look at the scriptures, the scriptures also mention the dresses 5,000, at least in Srimad Bhagavatam and these other scriptures. We have evidence that people used to, what kind of dresses people used to wear. Krishna's dress is described in details in Srimad Bhagavatam. The women used to dress in saris, and the dress was there. So we can see that it was also constant. But when our consciousness is polluted, when we are more in the material consciousness, more sense gratificatory consciousness, more selfish consciousness, that's when things change constantly. They change more. Knowledge is not same. It keeps on changing. Knowledge that was relevant a few years back is no longer relevant. And what is relevant today will not be relevant after a few years. So the more we are materially conscious or materially attached, the more things keep changing. And the higher we elevate ourselves or elevate our consciousness towards transcendence, the less changes we see. So, so talking about this consciousness, today most people, like Prabhupada talks about in the purport, he talks about, where is that? Yeah, those who are sinful in every step of life can expect only to be degraded into animal life, to suffer more and more the pangs of material existence. And this is also stated in Bhagavad Gita 16.19. So I would like to recite or quote that verse 16.19. Tan aham dvishata kruran samsareshu naradhaman kshipami ajas ram ashubhan asurishva eva yonishu. Translation: those who are envious and mischievous, who are the lowest among men, I perpetually cast into the ocean of material existence, into various demoniac species of life. So focusing more on this consciousness now, people don't have to elevate ourselves to a higher consciousness, or towards transcendence. We need to have the basic idea of the soul. And most people, general people, don't even have an idea of the soul. Who am I? Or what is it? This is my body. We as devotees know that. And Bhagavad Gita begins with this concept of the soul. But most people do not even have an idea of the soul. And even if they know about the soul, like those who are religious or those who are following some form of religion, they have concept of the soul. They know that I'm not this body, I'm spirit soul. But how deep do we understand? How, or in general people understand? Not much. So even if they are aware of the soul, then the next question is, we don't know how the soul is connected to the body. What is the relationship between this body and the soul? Sometimes people identify body as the soul. Sometimes people identify that the soul only exists in the human beings, but not in the animals. So there are so many different concepts. But in Bhagavad Gita text, second chapter, text number 29, Krishna says, and this is, I mean, verified by Krishna also. Some look on the soul as amazing, some describe him as amazing, and some hear of him as amazing, while others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. So Krishna himself is saying that this is the first Gohyam in Bhagavad Gita. There are a few levels of mystery or uh, Gohyam means secret or something that's not easily known, described in the Bhagavad Gita, and this is the first of them. Of course, we as we proceed in Bhagavad Gita, devotional service and other Guhyams are also mentioned, but this is the first one, the knowledge of the soul. And to be for us to elevate ourselves, we have to first of all understand the soul. We are not this body, we are the spirit soul. What is the connection between the body and the soul? And then the higher inquiry can begin. So focusing more on consciousness, we can see, and as it is described again in Bhagavad Gita, second chapter, consciousness is nothing but an extension of the soul. Consciousness is a symptom of the soul. Because the consciousness exists, we can understand that the soul exists. So consciousness is an extension of the soul which connects to the body. So we can easily understand that through the example of the sunshine. We can feel the sunshine. We can touch or interact with the sunshine. But sunshine, what is sunshine? Sunshine is nothing but an extension of the sun disk or the sun globe. So using that analogy or example, we can understand that the consciousness is an extension of the soul, just like sunshine is an extension of the sun. So the sun touches the earth or wherever the sunshine falls through the sunshine, and the sunshine energizes whatever it touches. So for example, when the sunshine reaches the planet earth, there are so many things happening because of the sunshine. It like energizes the earth. There are things get heated up, the ocean, the water in the ocean gets vaporized, become cloud, the cloud travel, the winds are produced because of the sunshine, differences in heat and temperature, and the clouds are then moved to different places, they rain. And this is just an example, but the unlimited way we can see that the sunshine energizes the earth. So similarly, the soul touches the body, so and touches and energizes this body with consciousness. So in fact, or so when we say the soul energizes or the body, we can, what it means is that it makes it animated. The body by itself is a dead body. It's a dead matter. But we are able to move, we are able to talk, we are able to feel. All of those, basically the different kinds of energy that we feel is because of the presence of the soul through the consciousness. So that is quite easy to understand, that how consciousness energizes the body. We become animate. We are able to do different things. We are able to act, react, etc. So when the soul and Srila Prabhupada, like even in his most basic talks, he would talk about the I'm not this body. And even in his most advanced talks with his senior disciples and sannyasis, he would focus still on that point, that I'm not this body, I'm spirit soul. Why? Because this he wanted to like ingrain and make sure that this gets to the degree of not just realizing that I'm a spirit soul, I'm not this body, but then take it further to act on this on the level of the spirit soul. So yeah, so what I was saying is that people in general don't know this small and very basic things, but they are so important. It is the base of everything for us to move towards transcendence, to elevate our consciousness. So now, then, okay, after we understand consciousness, therefore, then what do we? What's the next step? How can we take this understanding to the next level? So logically and naturally, we can understand that the way to affect the soul is through consciousness. So we are going into now a little more practical. So by purifying the consciousness, we are able to reach the soul. Now, there is a nice example that's mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam. In, in the evening or at night, if we are on the side of a lake or a pond, and there is a clear moon up in the sky, and we are able to see the reflection of the moon in the lake, provided it's a calm lake. But if there are ripples, what do we see? The moon also looks like ripply or not steady. And if there are too many ripples or too much of disturbance in the water, or if the water itself is muddy and unable to reflect, so then we are not able to see the moon at all, or we may be able to see the moon as just some light being reflected, but the shape is not clearly visible, nothing is visible. So depending on the ripples and the condition of the water, we are able to see the moon. So similarly, we are able to understand and see the soul depending on our consciousness, which is what is reflected through our body. The more materially attached our consciousness is, the more ripples there are. So, because transcendence has nothing to do with matter or with this material energy. And the more attached, more entangled, more involved with matter we are, the more ripples there are. And therefore, the soul is not visible at all. So what does it mean to be able to reach the soul? Are we saying that we can, when we say that we can reach the soul by purifying our consciousness, are we trying to say that we are trying to purify our soul? No, Krishna says clearly in Bhagavad Gita also that the soul is pure. And just like the moon is up in the sky and it is completely separate, similarly, the soul is separate and it is untouched. It is pure by itself. But the way it is perceived is is impure because of the consciousness. And we can understand that when I feel sorry because of the contamination, and therefore we can sometimes feel that we feel disturbed uh, when our consciousness is affected by material things. For example, let's say I have a headache or I'm sick, then we can it's very easy to understand that I'm disturbed. Although if I separate myself, the consciousness, the soul from that, then actually there is no reason to be disturbed. But because we are attached to the body, because the body is sick, because I have a headache, I feel disturbed. So if we can purify the consciousness and what the consciousness is in contact with, then we become free from this material attachment and can become happy and pure. So what it means is that we have to detach ourselves from matter, and that is achieved by chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, Cheto Darpanam Marjanam. So when we chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, what are we doing? We are purifying our consciousness. We are constantly trying to purify the consciousness, and that will automatically that makes us detached from matter. And that is the reason why we are there is recommendations in the shastras, in the scriptures, to chant the mantra in a repetitive way. So we repeat, and as in ISKCON, Srila Prabhupada has given this standard that everyone, all initiated devotees, have to chant a minimum of 16 rounds. So 16 rounds means repeated chanting of the holy name. And because this holy name is not of this material world, it is not of matter, it is spiritual, it is that sound vibration is spiritual in nature. By coming in constant touch with the holy name, our consciousness becomes purified, and the our original self is becomes more and more clearly visible. And that is the self realization. So the more we purify our consciousness, the better we are able to see our original or the constitutional position. And then there is a test that everyone, each and every living being special, has to go through, and that ultimate test is the that final test is the death. So how well we prepare ourselves for that final test, it it will affect how what our next destination is. If we are constantly in, if our consciousness is in touch with matter, and there are desires, there are different wants. Okay, I could not achieve this, I could not do that, I want this. If that's the consciousness, that's where it in Srimad Bhagavatam it is mentioned deve netrena. So using with the divine system, with the divine system in place, the consciousness or the soul is then taken to another body. But if we have prepared well for that test, if we have prepared, then the consciousness is then transferred to its original constitutional position. So that process or that purification is the sadhana bhakti. That's why that is sadhana bhakti. There are different levels of sadhana bhakti. There is something that we do daily, chanting, reading, etc. There are some activities that we do multiple times a day. There can be some things that are part of sadhana bhakti that we do once a day. There can be something that we do once every, maybe 2 times a week, maybe once a week. So there are different levels, and that is the way or recommended way in this, especially in this yuga, Kali Yuga, to um, practice sadhana bhakti. Basically it means practice. By constant practice, by constantly engaging with the pure sound vibration, we have to continue to elevate ourselves and take our consciousness towards transcendence. So that is the what I wanted to cover. So again, I will try to summarize. So I started speaking with the fame of Yudhisthira Maharaj, how his fame reached higher planetary systems also, not just on the earth. We talked about the difference in fame. The fame that we have today in the current world is mainly by outrageous activities, criminal activities, etc. But here, Maharaj's fame is nothing of that sort. It is about his virtuousness, about his transcendent, his consciousness, his consciousness about higher elevated consciousness. Sorry. So because that is being spread in other planetary system, and that is natural, because the living beings in the higher planetary systems are of a higher consciousness. So we talked about then how could news travel in the higher planetaries, in other planetary systems. So there must have been some communication and some travel, interplanetary travel between the planets, and people came and visited, observed, and then took the news back and spread it. But now we don't see that people or living beings come here because of our degraded consciousness, because of our polluted consciousness. Then we talked about the difference between taking the consciousness to the next level. We talked about the difference in consciousness between, or the basic differences between animal and humans, and how most people don't even try to understand that. And even if they do understand, they don't inquire, or they don't try to go to the next level of inquiry and trying to understand. And because of this polluted consciousness, we talked about how things are constantly changing, versus in the Vedic culture, or persons of higher transcendence are almost constant, very, very little change. Because that means that what they have, what they are practicing, what they are wearing, what they are eating, it's all perfect. But we talked about, like, when we are materially contaminated or material conscious, we keep changing because we are not happy. What made us happy, what made us what gave us satisfaction a few months back or a few years back, is no longer giving me satisfaction, and therefore we constantly try to move on to different things. And therefore therefore it is said that in the material world, change is the only constant. So Vedic knowledge, we talked all everything related to transcendence, Vedic knowledge, and it's all unchanged. The language Sanskrit was there years back, and it's still there. It's communicated. The scriptures are communicated in that. The dress we talked about, all of them, they don't change, and they don't change because they are perfect. People are happy with them. For example, the Sanskrit language is the most scientific language. Why? There's no change needed in that. There's nothing today that can beat that language. So why change it? So, and then we talked more about the consciousness itself, how the consciousness is perceived through the body, how consciousness travels to the body, how the body is affected by consciousness. Using the example, we try to understand using the example of the sunshine and the sun. The sunshine touches the earth, we can interact with the sunshine, and the sun energizes everything using sunshine. So similarly, the soul, we are spirit soul, and the spirit soul is interacting with outside world and the body using consciousness, and it is energizing our body and other things also that we touch or whom we interact with. The soul has the capacity to energize others and the body through consciousness. And then we talked about how purifying our consciousness using the example of the moon and the ripples in the lake. The moon is clearly visible when the lake is calm, but the more the ripples are there, the moon is not visible. So similarly, when the consciousness is unstable or consciousness is attached to the matter, we are not able to perceive or get a clarity of the soul, which is required for us to transcend. And by purifying the consciousness, we can get closer and closer towards self-realization, which is what the goal of life is. And by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, we are getting towards that goal of, and by purifying the consciousness gradually. So that's all I have for this verse. Now I would like to open it up for any discussion, realization, corrections.
Okay, I will.
Go ahead, Mataji.
Yes,
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Yeah.
Sandhya. Okay. Yes, Lingaraju Prabhu.
It was a very nice, systematic class. The way you always say, at the end, summary was also very good, Prabhu. I think you're talking about the fame in the today's world. So, how people, by hook or crook, they want to become famous. It doesn't matter what is the, real famous. It doesn't matter. They just want to be famous. Put something on, on social media or something. They want to do bad and then they want to become famous. It unlike people do good things from the material point of view. Maybe they also, in the modern world, become famous. I think, unlike the example that you gave, the devotees are still they're doing the ultimate good, but they don't become as famous as, from the fame perspective, right? So, but I think that is one point I was thinking about it, Prabhu. So the one example you talked about the change. Change is only constant thing in this world. So if that, in corporate world we always hear, right? If there is no change, means there is no advancement. Of course,
Yeah.
the change has to be there in the consciousness from the material perspective. There has to be upliftment, but people doesn't talk about that. Talk about it, the external things. I was just thinking about it. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, because the things keep changing because we are not satisfied with what was there before, and there's never going to be satisfaction. We want to keep, and for sense gratification, we want to keep doing more and more gratification. There's no limit to it. Thank you, Prabhu. Sandhya Mataji, you were trying to say something.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Please
Hare
accept
Krishna.
my humble obeisances. All glories to Guru Maharaj.
Please accept mine too. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
It was very illuminating, Prabhu. Thank you very much. I was reminded of the Dhyana Yoga chapter when you talked about the muddy waters and the moon not being reflecting. Actually, that was very nice analogy, and the more we are detached from the material, the stage where you can see the self, that was very clearly described. Thank you very much, Prabhu. I liked it so much. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Mataji.
Hare Krishna. It
Hare
was very,
Krishna.
very illuminating, the soul and the consciousness, the sunshine and the sun example. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mataji. Okay, anybody, any other devotees have any comments or things to share? If not, we can stop here. We are almost there. I know this was a Saturday. We have 1 hour, and like I said in the beginning, it was a small purport and a small verse, but I was somehow able to add things. Thank you, devotees. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.